Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to some more Warpforge content as we get ready to transition from the closed beta, and I believe all the keys have gone out, into the early access Steam release on October 19th. My bad, I had it on the 18th, just mixing up some of my dates. But October 19th, it's going to be live on Steam for early access. November 2nd is going to be mobile access, as far as we've been told. Um, and I hope you're finding the videos helpful. I definitely felt like during the last video, I was like, I should probably do something about crafting cards, or at least evaluating some cards. And I wish I could take us through every card today, but I think most players are going to figure out to some degree what's good, what's not. And I really wanted to take us through some of the more important decisions, which is instead of what commons am I going to use, what rares I'm going to use. And let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do a rare video for each faction, because obviously you're going to be crafting those, you're going to be making those, or trying to get those through your campaign. But I wanted to go over epics and legendaries, because in addition to the fact that you can get extra legendaries out of the premium track, I've been trying to stay really in touch with the community, especially on the community Discord. And feel free to join if you haven't already. I always put the link in the description of the videos. Um, and apparently, if you're going to get 12 wins in draft mode, here's a little update from my last video. You either have a high chance of getting a legendary, or apparently you just get one. That was the word on the Discord. And so, although I can't verify that, it sounds like a lot of players have somewhat confirmed that when you use the 5 of these black crystals for the premium draft, if you max it out, I believe that's something you get access to. So I definitely want to break down some of the cards. I always love doing card evaluation, and just to give you guys just a little bit of a sense of what you might want to craft, what you might want to hold off on. There have been balance changes apparently a little bit after probably I kind of stopped playing the alpha. There might be a little bit of change here and there in some of the cards as I'm looking at them again, but I'm pretty confident I can give you a bit of an understanding of where the cards are at in terms of raw power level, some of the synergies, and just a bit of a gut feeling of like, is this something I'm going to really need? Is this something I'm going to use in all my Ultramarine decks, all my Tyranid decks, Orks decks? And is it something that I should immediately spend a wild card on? So that's enough of me talking intro. Likes, comments, subscribes all help the channel a lot. So thank you for tuning in and showing your support. So yeah, going to start with Ultramarines, top of the list. Why not? And what I think is most interesting about the fact that you gain access to, certain legendary cards at certain points, as well as epics, is that does include the warlords. So I actually never got Magnus Calgar, didn't open them, and then we got wild cards, in the closed beta, pretty late on. So and all of my stuff is going to reset, of course, when we get into early access. So I have played with and against all of the warlords in the game. But I didn't actually get to play with every warlord in the game. I usually tried to make work what I had. So I still feel that I can confidently tell you which warlords may be worth it. So I think out of the 3 Ultramarine warlords, Uriel, Varro, and Marneus, that Varro and Marneus are just going to have a bit more play to them, and a bit more power to them. Now, you can play a Uriel aggro deck, and that's probably what I'm going to play when I open the beginner starter deck. But I think that if you wanted to craft either Varro or Magnus, that would be very reasonable. I think you will not be upset with playing either leader. I actually was more inclined to play Varro. They both of their I should just show y'all because you're plenty of players who might not know. Varro basically gives you access to 3 different powers. One is putting a shield on something, which obviously it deals damage that it breaks the shield. One is drawing, and it ends up costing 0. One is going to draw you a stratagem from your deck, and then I believe it's like 2 or 3. I can't remember exactly. deals some amount of damage to something. So you get this card selection, and quite frankly, what I always love about Varro is you just spend 2 energy, you use the card that's 0 energy to draw a stratagem out of your deck, and you just rip out of, basically thin your deck, drawing some of, the most powerful stratagems. I'd say, you've got some really great unconditional removal, things like that. I think Varro is a great kind of mid-range control option for the deck. And I think Marneus, on the other hand, just draws you straight up a card. But he's got plus 5 health. He's got 40 health as opposed to 35. I think they're both pretty close on power level. Obviously, Marneus kind of bends a little bit more towards control. So if that's kind of your jam and you just want to draw a bunch of cards, go late, have enough health to go late, Marneus might be a better craft for you. But needless to say, and I'll try and keep this as concise as I can, I think crafting either of these warlords you're going to be happy with. Tactical Insight, just moving right along. Interesting card. So it's 0 energy, get 2 energy. What's significant about this specific card, other than this kind of idea of ramping, is that when you trigger a Codex ability from an Ultramarine, which says, when you've spent all your energy this turn, do something, you'll do your Codex, then you play Tactical Insight, you use that 2 energy, it re-triggers Codex. And I think it's one of the few, if maybe not, it might be the only card that re-triggers Codex. So I always struggle with Tactical Insight. I think you've got a lot of card advantage, so cards like this can go quite a long way. It does feel a little bad if you're having to spend resources fighting for the board and then you draw this and you're like, I can't really do too much with this. I just need to play some big units or put multiple units on the board. But I think Tactical Insight is a card, I don't know that I would say right off the bat craft it, but it's probably a card you'll end up wanting in the future. Codex Discipline, give +1 ranged attack to your troops and trigger their Codex abilities. I did not find this to be good enough on 3 energy. If this was 2 energy, I would probably consider it quite a lot more. Obviously, it would come down a turn sooner. It's already hard enough to keep your units alive over the course of multiple turns, right? You're always fighting for board in this game. That's what I found. So, this idea of like kind of getting a bunch of little buffs plus your ranged attack is just, I don't think, enough of a payoff to craft this card. Definitely not, at least right off the bat. So it's a little bit of an unfortunate one. Eliminator, as much as I've tried this actually a little bit recently, as much as Sniper is one of the most powerful mechanics in the game, so when you do range damage and would kill the unit, you don't take retaliation damage. So essentially you're just like, you're killing that unit for free. 3 health is an important marker. Most warlords have 2 to 3 attack, right? Or access to 2 to 3 damage off of their warlord ability that they have access to every single turn. Baseline, you want your units to have 3 health. It'll either make them work a little bit more for it, or they'll have to use one of their ephemeral cards to get rid of it. So Eliminator sort of passes that test, but his melee attack is obviously terrible. And so he can get rushed down by all of the different flank units that would, for any Magic players in the room, that's haste, except you can't attack a leader with it. You can only attack a unit. So I would not recommend Eliminator. I don't think that it's good enough. I was kind of playing around with it in this 3 slot, and quite frankly, I just don't like the card that much. And Taro Cronus. Now, if you want to go big vehicles, late game, Magnus Calgar, this is a great guy for you, right? So what does he do? 4 energy, 5 health, and health is definitely one of the, if not the most important stat in the game. When you deploy a vehicle, give it flank. Excellent. And talent, Spear of Macragge. He actually just makes a ephemeral card that gives 2 armor, which is so reducing all incoming damage by 2 on that unit, and Vanguard. And for those of you who haven't gotten to play the game a lot, Vanguard is Frontline, which was from Horus Heresy Legions, I think. I played a bit of that, not too much. Or, God, what are the other ones? It just obviously means that they have to kill that unit first. Vanguard, especially as the game goes later, is more and more valuable because you're in this race to kill the other leader, and making them have to stop off and kill a unit that's already tanky is pretty good. So this card just gives you a ton of value. Obviously, its attack stats are like totally reasonable. So I think if you love vehicles, if you love you want to play Marneus, you're going to be playing Control, and there's some vehicle synergies which you guys will see. Antaro Cronus is a great value legendary card. So I think that's something I would encourage crafting. Death from Above. I think this card is pretty good. So it's 4 energy to deal 5 damage, obviously, to a unit or to your opponent's face. It is beefy enough to kill most things. It's pretty efficient. And if you're playing kind of a control mid-range style with Ultramarines, whether you're playing Varro and getting these into your hand from the Stratagem card every turn, or you're just rawly drawing cards through Marneus Calgar, you probably want, I would say, 1 to 2 Death from Aboves in your deck. Because they're either going to take out units or they just allow you to turn the corner super quickly on your opponent's life total. So Death from Above, while I wouldn't say like essential, is probably a card you'll end up crafting. And that's sort of what I would carry over what I just said to Primaris Chaplain. So decent stats, 4/3, 5 health, Codex, so if you use all your energy that turn, give +1 melee and range attack. This is great. If you can trigger this more than once, you're living the dream. But that's the whole thing, right? Are you triggering it more than once? I think the 4 and 5 slot are pretty clogged for many of the factions, but I would say definitely for Ultramarines. So your 4-drop needs to really be doing it for you. I think Primaris Chaplain is fine. It doesn't, it's not convincing me that it's one of the best ones, but I think that it's a solid option. Especially like if you are playing aggro, like if that's where you kind of start out, Primaris Chaplain might be a decent one to craft early on. Okay, let's talk about some of my favorite Ultramarine cards. I just love the art, and I used to be building these models, so it's a good time. Primaris Impulsor, 2/4, obviously heavier on ranged, 5-drop, 5 health. When you play it, you're going to make a free 2/2 that has 3 health. It's just excellent. It's a 2-for-1. It's putting multiple things on the board. If it lives, you get another free 2/2 probably after that. I think Primaris Impulsor is probably one of the most essential cards to make. So you're not going to go wrong if you craft this card. It's definitely a pretty nice linchpin in the sort of mid-game of Ultramarines. And if your opponent doesn't answer it, it's going to run away with the game. Primaris Justiciar. I didn't have this card for all the alpha, sadly, and then I crafted 2 off the bat when I could, when the closed beta happened and messed around with it. This card always was so good. Okay, 5 energy, 6 health. It's a 6/2, so obviously it's not going to be great into ranged factions. I'm thinking about like Eldar, for instance, right? They're going to have a little bit of a hard time, but look at all the stats on this. You get a 6/2 with 6 health. It's got Vanguard, and probably the most important part, because otherwise it wouldn't be that good, Codex, stun a random enemy unit. Or random enemy, actually, so you can stun warlords with it. This is just incredible. I mean, it's beefy enough that it's going to be a little hard to kill. It's definitely not unkillable. Like, you all might know there's a 6-drop in Ultramarines that has 6 ranged attack and flank. So that could come down one-shot this. But you're just getting a lot of upfront value. If anyone has gotten to play, and we'll talk about them, with the Banshees from the Eldar, which is like very, very similar to this kind of design, you just know how impactful it is to have a body that may not immediately die, that stuns something up front, and if it lives, you get further value. I think this is an excellent card. I think you probably, like most Ultramarine decks, should be crafting it. It is the best Vanguard unit that they have. Yeah, sorry, I get really excited about the cards that took a while to actually get to play with. Sergeant Tellian, I was trying this in the slot. So what does it do? It's a 2/6, right? Really beefy, ranged attack, 5 health. Kind of passes the benchmark as you get up into the 5-drop slot. Codex, give sniper to your units this turn. Very, very big, right? So it gives itself, all your other units sniper. Obviously can be a huge, huge swing. So you're essentially going to drop it, get the Codex immediately. give sniper to your units. I think it's a great card. Is it essential? I don't think so. I don't think it's like a game-breaking card. It doesn't give you quite as much value as the guy who makes the Spears of Macragge. But I think that Sergeant Tellian does do a lot of work and would not be a unit that you'll be too displeased to make. I think the difference is you got to look at what your ranged units are doing in your deck. And if there's a chance that you're going to play this and it's really just not going to have that much impact on the board, then it's a card that you may want to skip for now. Okay, Lieutenant Calcius. Obviously, this is a card, pretty beefy, 6/3 for 6 health, 6 drop. Codex, deal 3 damage to the enemy warlord, right? You're going to play this, lightning bolt their face for you Magic players out there. Obviously, bent more towards an aggressive deck. 6 drops, there are a lot of pretty great value 6 drops. I think that Calcius is a card worth crafting if you think you're going to be on aggro for quite a bit. It packs a big punch. If they don't answer it immediately, it's going to hit them in the face for essentially 9 damage with the first Codex, plus the if it survives its attack, then you're dealing 12 with this card over the course of 2 turns. So I think Calcius is worth considering, but I would say it's pretty much only worth considering for an aggro deck. That was my experience, at least. Anyway. All right, getting to the last 4. Okay. Well, as we might notice, we've arrived to some maybe underwhelming cards. All right, 8 health, pretty beefy. 7 energy, paying a lot of energy. 8/5, so this thing slaps, right? And they're going to have to do some work to get rid of it. It's Codex, draw a card. Sure, that's okay. I guess maybe at the top of an aggro deck, you could say, all right, I drop this. I'm going to draw a card because I'm maybe running out of cards and it's like a big body. I would not recommend making this card right off the bat. I'm not sure, although I love the Librarians, don't get me wrong. I think they're sick. Our boy doesn't really have any psychic powers. He's just drawing you a card. So I'm not excited about this card, and I did have it rather, and I never used it. I could be missing the mark on here, but I just don't think the 7 drop is getting enough, considering some of the other cards that we're going to be talking about. Avenging Zeal. Give +2 melee attack and +2 ranged attack to all units. I just can't really imagine a world where you want to pay 8 energy for this sort of effect. You can try going wide with Ultramarines. You can sort of do it to some degree. But 8 energy for just +2 on all your unit. If this maybe costs like 5 or 6, no, maybe 5 would be a little too much, but like 6, okay. We're kind of talking about like a curve topper for an aggressive deck. 8 energy to not add anything to the board aside from stats, I just don't think is good enough. So I'll keep it there. So this is what I'm talking about. Now we're going to talk about a card that is just excellent. Redemptor Dreadnought. Love the Dreadnoughts. So sick. Codex, deal 1 to 2 damage to all enemies. 8 health. 8 ranged attack. 5, right? So the stats are virtually the same, right? They're just sort of swapped. Would you rather be drawing a card on 7? Or would you rather be, kind of just mowing down their entire board, right? And obviously you can re-trigger Codex with certain things like we talked about. And there is a card that puts a vehicle in your hand and you can get a reduced Redemptor Dreadnought. Now, with the 3-drop vehicle card, which is a common, let's see if I can snag that for you guys real quick. Oh, it's a rare. Whoops. It is not a common. Armored Support. If you know anything about starting out in decks, and sorry, we are talking about a rare here for a second, just to give some context. And you start in a game, your deck's pretty budget, it's not super powerful. What's the best thing you can do in CCGs that allow you? Find a card that gets more powerful cards in your deck for free. Choose an Ultramarines vehicle, put it in your hand, it costs 2 less. Most of the time, you're going to be given the option of Redemptor Dreadnought, Primaris, the 5-drop, that's really good. The 10-drop, I think that's the Repulsor, which at 8 is pretty hefty. You could just craft 2 armored supports and be like, I'm not going to get any top end vehicles. I'm just going to say armored support's going to help, you know, give me late game for my vehicle deck for whether I'm playing Marneus or Varro. So I just want to point that out. Like, it's not that you need to like immediately make 2 Redemptor Dreadnoughts, because you can have access to cards that will essentially, give you a Redemptor Dreadnought at a reduced rate, actually. But you can't go wrong with making this card. I just think that in general, this card's going to do a lot of work for you. I would probably make the vehicle rare cards first if you want to wait. But then I would doubt, I'm pretty sure you'll find yourself wanting to craft this card at some point. And I think one of probably the bigger stinkers of them all, 9 energy, huge health, huge attack, and ranged, and he'll make a give invulnerable to a friendly troop this turn. This is just, it's 9 energy. It's a lot. Now, maybe you're a control player and you're looking at this and you're like, oh my god, this is great. I'm getting more card advantage. It's a huge stat. But think about this. If you do not have Vanguard on the board, the opponent will just ignore this, right? By turn, a 9 energy turn, people are closing things out. People are, wailing away at your Warlord. This does nothing to protect your Warlord, especially like the first turn you play it. So I just wouldn't recommend Captain Sicarius. I think, honestly, when I'm looking at this, the biggest bang for your buck that you get out of crafting a legendary is probably going to be Marneus or Kronos. And if you're really into Ultramarines and you've got that legendary and it's burning a hole in your pocket, probably just make Marneus. You get to build different types of decks, and play a different Warlord, and arguably a Warlord that I think is pretty dang good. Or you can make Kronos and start kind of building more of this kind of mid-range, late-game vehicle strategy. So I'm sure I've spent enough time on Ultramarines. I want to give everyone else my time and attention, but that is kind of my rough take. I think you're probably going to want to use epic wildcards on cheaper, more effective cards, right? So just to sum up, if we're thinking about epics, whether you want to play Varro, I think that's a great option. I would prioritize Primaris Impulsor and Primaris Judiciar. I keep wanting to say Justiciar. It's not the same word. And then I would hesitate to kind of lean towards like Teleon or Calcius, or even Dreadnought. I just think these 2 5-drops are excellent. And as you know, probably, if you're a card game player, if you can get more powerful early game cards, that's probably where you want to be. So that's my million cents on that. So moving right along to Orks. I actually really, really like the beginner Ork, Warlord. So where is he? Yeah, Gruk Face Ripa. So if anyone has seen my videos, I made like, this was from the community. This is not something I strictly made. It's basically like a go wide kind of storm strategy Orcs deck where you, like, on turn, I think it's usually turn 5 or 6, because it allows you to use Degreen Mob, which real quick, let's just go, or Degreen Horde. This did get changed to an epic. Right off the bat, you want to play a bunch of Orcs, and I think that is one of the best ways to play the Orc decks. You're probably going to want to craft Degreen Horde. But before I get carried away with the rares. So I think the starter Orc guy is pretty good. It's kind of, it's really on par with Thraka, because this is giving +1 range, +1 melee permanently to your troops. What the other card is doing is thinning your deck and adding units to your hand that get buffed as well. So I think Boss Zagstruck, although has like a decent sort of aggro bent, and if you're down for aggro, he would kind of be your guy. I just think that Gazkul and the other guy who I can't think, Face Ripa, just have a lot of really great card advantage and like good setup for the Orcs. So yeah, I think, crafting Gazkul could be fine, but I don't think it's necessary unless you want to craft these. I think you can win plenty of games with Mr. Ripa. So I think that's great. Makari, definitely a pretty great legendary. adjacent units have +1 melee attack, right? So you put him smack in the middle, he's going to buff everything else. And then he returns to your hand. So you can't really get rid of it, and it's kind of a permanent buff for the whole game. So I think Makari is just a pretty solid legendary. Prophet of Wa is an interesting card. Choose a stratagem from your deck and draw it. Now, this is excellent with the Green Horde. If you're all in on that deck, you're going to want Prophet of Wa. It's definitely one of the best enablers for the Green Horde, which is going to make all your troops cost 2 less, right? It's kind of that swarming strategy. So Prophet of Wa definitely sets that up. So I think what I'm sort of sensing from Orks already, while just talking about it, is that it really depends on what build you're going for. You're probably going to change what you want here based on what you're playing with Orks. And there are some like specific card synergies. So like Spanner, there's some cards that like if you have a Spanner in play, do this. I think as if you have something else, do this. Mob, give a random bonus to a friendly vehicle in your hand. Decent stats for an Ork epic, and I guess if you're really trying to make the vehicle thing work, that could be good. I found them kind of unreliable. I only played, I think, the 5-drop Ork vehicle at the top of the curve because it was like kind of just efficient for the body that you get. But I believe it's a defense card that the Orks have now. Reduces the... Why am I just talking? I should just show you guys. Just click off this for a second. Extractor Rig. Your next vehicle costs 2 less. This is a powerful ability. Don't overlook it. So this card may have actually opened up the ability for a more reliable and consistent vehicle strategy. But obviously, the defense sort of cards, I'm still unclear like at what point you get to choose them and things like that. I know you can get them from the Forge track, but I believe you're supposed to have the options when you come into the game, but I guess maybe you don't get the options until you have every single one. That might be it. Sorry, got a little lost there. Defgun Luda, so whenever another troop dies, gain +1 range attack. I think this card's generally been pretty solid. It's been a pretty good performer on 4 energy in most Ork decks because you're going to be going in there and bashing and doing a lot of damage and stuff like that. So this gets beefier and beefier. So I don't know that I would call this essential. I think actually in the Ork decks, the one that ends up doing a lot of work, with like a similar intention. Where are you? Oh, they changed the art. That's sweet. Shooter Boy. Deal 1 damage to a random enemy. Mob is when you attack something. So this is kind of doing that similar impression where it's just dealing damage whenever you're dealing damage. Luda basically is like you don't get the payoff up front. You get it later. So I think it's a solid card. Honestly, I really only played the one style of the Ork deck, so it's hard for me to give too much information. But I think this is a solid card stat-wise. So I don't think I can lead you astray by saying that that's probably a decent craft. Deal 2 to 4 damage to 3 random enemies. It's just a little bit awkward. It's definitely one of the weakest kind of like board sweepery cards of the ones that the other factions gain access to. I would probably play like 1 of these, depending on how my deck is set up. But just because it's not reliable, obviously, when a card's going to be a little bit less consistent, it's not something I'm going to like strongly recommend. Killican. It's fine. It's got 5 health for 5 energy, which is like an okay rate. It's got quite a lot of ranged attack. It is unstable, right? So when it dies, it deals 0 to 3 damage to your adjacent units. This is also why the vehicles are a little sketch, right? Because they do in fact backfire, and there's a drawback. So I'm not huge on this card. I wouldn't rush to make it. But if you're into this sort of vehicle strategy and you just really want to test it out, here's what I would recommend for any faction if you want to test stuff out. Go in and draft that faction, draft those cards, try them, see if they're good, right? That's like an easy way, because I think you get a free draft every day, to just test cards. So take what I'm saying here with some caveats, right? Maybe some things have shifted a little bit. Towards the end of the alpha when I wasn't playing as much. Go test them out, but as of now, I wouldn't super recommend Killican. Mechboy Gazmech. This card was interesting today. So again, this is already kind of a better rate. You've got 5 energy, 6 health, talent, Mechaniac, Mob, lower the cost of a random vehicle in your hand. So when someone is attacking a unit with melee attack, you're going to get that trigger. So up front, you're getting something out of this, right? It's lowering the cost of vehicles in your hand, and then give a custom job of your choice to a friendly vehicle. I think this is just an upgrade, right? I believe that's what that is. It doesn't actually explain here. So decent stats, decent size. I think that if you're really going for the vehicle synergies, you probably have to have Mech Boy Gas Mech in your deck. So probably a decent legendary to craft, although it wouldn't be the first one that I personally would recommend. Veteran Storm Boy, pretty beefy guy, got a lot of stats, right? Flying, flank. When you deploy a Storm Boy, give it flank. So if you've got other ones, which is like this guy, the small one, and there are ways to have that synergy in Orks pretty easily. 6 health, 6 energy, 6/4. I think it's a solid card. I think it is like a pretty solid 6-drop for the Orcs. So this is kind of a card stat wise with like a little micro synergy that I think is pretty good. So I probably would recommend making a Storm Boy. Archshell Gurk I think is also pretty beefy. 7 energy is a lot, but 8 health. Vanguard. Vanguard is a very good keyword, especially as you get later in the game. Huge attack stat. And then he also generates give 2 armor to a friendly troop. So if this thing doesn't die, it's going to take even longer to die. So I think if you're looking for a good curve topper in some sort of like just kind of general aggro mid-rangey orc deck, Gurk is going to be your guy. I don't think you need this card in the more like Degreen Horde combo build. But I think the card is pretty beefy, and it has some really incredible stats. Will of Gork. Interesting card in Orcs. I always thought that. Destroy all troops in play. It is an interesting kind of like, sort of reset button, right? And I always kind of hesitated to put this in decks because I just didn't really understand how this is supposed to interact with Orcs. Yes, they can generate card advantage, so maybe you like, vie for board position, and then you just wipe the board and sort of refill. But you have to spend your energy doing that, right? So then when you pass the turn, your opponent is up tempo. So I know that board wipes kind of always mean that your opponent's up tempo, but I think tempo is really important in this game in a way that tempo is not always so important in Magic the Gathering. So that's kind of how I evaluate cards. So I'm a little sus of this, but I think it's obviously a sick card. Is it something I would recommend right off the bat? Probably not. But I think it's a card you'll probably end up crafting down the line. Rock Invasion. I also love the art on this card. The guy's getting ready with the sandstorm. Deploy 8 random Orc infantry. Tomb Worlds. Not Toon Worlds. Very close, but not. Which we'll talk about, is very similar, except it's cheaper. And I think it actually is enabled a little bit better. 10 energy is quite a lot. However, if we look at these two cards right next to each other, this is more of a control version of the deck. So if you're looking for some like go late, just bunch of, play a bunch of orc kind of deal, these are kind of your linchpin cards that you need. Would I recommend that strategy? No. I always felt like Degreen Horde was like one of the most powerful things you could do with orcs. You're kind of comboing off by turn 5 or 6. Sometimes you could do it earlier. And it's pretty hard to answer for the most part if you have a decent combo turn. So I just don't know that I would really recommend kind of like a just stock aggro mid-range build. I think sort of the combo more setup stuff through Degreen Horde is probably one of the better strategies for orcs. And I'm a little wary of the vehicle stuff, but I think Mech Boy is like a great enabler. On stats, I think Veteran Storm Boy, Archshell Gurk are doing like a ton of heavy lifting. And then these three legendaries are doing quite a lot as well. Whether you just want to play Thraka, Makari is just kind of good everywhere because it's just like free card advantage, and Prophet of Wa to set up your Degreen Horde. Um, so this is really pick your path kind of territory. So if you heard a type of orc deck from me that you like, and you heard me say, hey, you might want to put these cards in it, just consider that. So I hope that is helpful. Moving on to the Eldar. I would say similarly for the Eldar, in the Warlord department, as you can see, I never opened these Warlords, the whole alpha, unfortunately. But I did play against them quite a lot, so I feel like I have a decent take on them. I feel like Madrell Galen, who is the rare one, is totally fine. It makes a unit. There's the same one for the Necrons as well. It just makes a free. I shouldn't say free. You have an ephemeral card you can use every single turn to make a unit. And specifically with Eldar, you want anything that has Waystone on it, and those things do. So I'm gonna say, like, you do not have to craft an Eldar Warlord right off the bat. And as you might have seen in my tier list video, if you haven't seen it, feel free to check it out. It's on the channel. I basically put Keltok as the best, I think, the best or one of the best warlords. And you can kind of go in there and see my explanation. Zephyrblade has always been one of the weaker warlords for what he does, but he's got a huge health pool, and Eldar going late can do some crazy stuff. They also can have some really aggressive starts, and Eliak kind of enables that a little bit with the fact that you've got more health to work with. I'd probably pick Anvir over Eliak if I was going to craft, and I'm not going to say probably. I definitely would pick Anvir. So if you're super about Eldar and you're like, I want to play the best Eldar warlord, Anvir, in my opinion, is it. So feel free to check out the video about Eldar and about the tier list if you want to kind of hear a bit more of my reasoning. Okay, Windrider. 0-1, obviously we're looking more at ranged when we talk about Eldar. Shuriken 2. So this is adding 2 damage first up front before you're then going to take retaliation damage. So this effectively has 3 attack in the ranged or 2 attack in the melee department, which is good to know. Flying flank, 3 health. This thing can pick off obviously small units here and there, and is relatively efficient. It does not have Waystone. This is a card I would say I would not rush to make, but I think that it's decent, but not something I would go crazy to make. Striking Scorpion, 3 energy, 2 health. What did I say about anything under 3? It's not going to live for very long. However, it's got stealth, so it's got a little bit of time for setup, and it's got Shuriken 2, and it's got Waystone. So this thing can take out a 4 health unit and trade, and you get a Waystone, right? Or you take out a 2 health unit, it stays on the board. But I think what you're getting here really is a 3 energy unit that can deal 4 damage, like when you want it to, because it's got stealth. You get to kind of set it up a little bit, and then you collect the Waystone, you move about your day. I think Striking Scorpion is a pretty reasonable card to be making. I would caution rushing into it, but I do think that he's got quite a lot of upside to him. Now, Warp Spider, one of my favorite units. 4-2, 3 health, 3 energy. Okay, so it kind of passes the health test. Waystone, stealth, great. Strike, return this troop to your hand, right? So this thing just is kind of strictly better than the card we just talked about, right? Because it's got more health, and it's got very similar stats. It doesn't have Shuriken, but it can punch for 4. And then it returns to your hand, and it's got stealth. So again, you get to set up and choose, okay, this would be a good turn to get this down, and then I can either trade this and collect the Waystone, move about my day, or I can deal damage to the face, put it back in my hand. I think Warp Spider is a great card. I think in most Eldar decks, you'd be pretty happy with it, because again, you're just getting so much upfront value. And you can kind of pick and choose how you want to use them. So I think you can't really go wrong making Warp Spider. The caveat is I would still recommend at least one other epic over it, so we'll get there. Dance of Death. Give a Shuriken 2 to a friendly unit. You're giving this to your warlord. Oh, wait, it says friendly unit. Did they change it? I think they did. That so this card. All right. Well, you guys can flame me in the comments if I'm wrong. You let me know. This card used to be able to apply to Warlord. It looks like because now it says unit, that is not the case. Because is there a difference between? Oh, I have to figure out how they word stuff like that. Okay. I'll try and check back about this. What was it? It was I'm trying to think of what. Right, it was in the Ultramarines. Right, that specifically says enemy warlord. Infantry troops. To your troops. Okay, so I caution at saying this. When it says troops, that's different than unit. Right? So, and sniper also says unit. Okay. And this also says unit, so that applies to your... This is all... Okay. Okay, so I'm fairly sure this card works the same. I think unit does include warlord. I think it does, based on those other cards. So you're... Sorry, that was a... I wanted to try and make sure I'm giving you guys the right information. Giving 2 shuriken to your warlord is excellent. So again, go into draft, maybe draft this card, check it out. Giving 2 permanent upfront damage to your warlord for the rest of the game is a good card. Is it essential? No. But I think Dance of Death is a card that I had in all of my Eldar decks. So I think it's a pretty reasonable craft. But also Eldar has a lot of really strong legendaries and epics, so hold on to your hats for a second. Okay. We were talking about Primaris Judiciar. This is kind of the Eldar version. Howling Banshee, super cool card. Howling Banshees are super cool. Sorry, I fanboy over like every faction for the most part. Waystone, Flank, Rally, right, comes into play. Stun an enemy. You get so much value out of this card. It's a 4 energy card, 4 health, so decent rate, 4 attack, 2 ranged, obviously because it's more melee based. Waystone comes into play, beats something, comes into play, stuns something. So Judiciar has more value because if it stays on the board longer, you get more stun triggers and it has a bit more health. But it comes down a turn later. Howling Banshee, craft this thing. You're not going to be upset. You're either going to punch something, collect your Waystone, and stun something, like basically baseline, or you live the dream, you stun something, you punch, you get to punch again, and then you collect your Waystone. Super, super good card. So can't go wrong with Howling Banshee. Speaking of super, super good cards, Nadu Fireheart has kind of always been a pretty nuts card. So 4 energy, 4 health, decent rate, 5 attack, definitely getting pretty beefy now. Flying, flank, strike. Give invulnerable to adjacent troops this turn. This thing swoops in, you put it right in the center of your 1 or 2 units. It punches something. Obviously, you want to punch something and live, right? So that's an important note. And then you give both of your adjacent things invulnerable, so they just get to, attack the units with 0 drawback. Nadu Fireheart is an excellent card. I don't think you can go wrong making this thing. It is definitely one of the legendaries that you're not going to want to see on the other side of the board when you're playing against Eldar. Okay, Witchblade Warlock. So this is where we definitely take a dive from we're playing some powerful cards too. I'm not so sure. Waystone, okay, fine. 5 health, 4 energy, decent rate, 4/3. Okay, what is Witchfire? Ephemeral. Deal 1 to 3 damage, and if you've got a Waystone, repeat this effect. Now, Witchfire itself is a sick card that you would get if your Witchblade Warlock lives. I don't think this is essential. There are other ways I think you can have that in your deck anyway. But I think Witchblade Warlock is a pretty solid card. It's definitely not as powerful, obviously, as some of the cards we've been talking about on rate. But I think that if it lives, your opponent's not gonna like that. Obviously, it's a little bit better against kind of like cheaper, smaller units, stuff like that. But I think Witchblade Warlock is totally fine. Infinity Circuit. Well, we'll talk about the combo that's coming up. Gain 5 Spirit Stones for 5 energy. I was always trying to evaluate if this is good enough. My gut tells me it's maybe not in the average deck, but you can build a deck where this would be good. That's my caveat. So if you're trying to build the deck that we're about to talk about, Infinity Circuit is probably where it's at. Oh, just another beefy legendary. I really do feel like Eldar just have such a, I don't know, they cornered the market on like these really strong legendary units. 5 energy, 4 health, so a little bit of a weird rate there. 4 attack, 2 ranged. Waystone, stealth, solid. Shuriken 4. This thing is popping a Warlord for 8 damage, and unless they've got a Vanguard unit, there is nothing they can do about it. Because it's got stealth, so it's not dying. Now, sorry, I shouldn't say that. It can die to AoE effects, but that's it. I would play this card. I think Striking Scorpion Exarch is a pretty scary unit. Shuriken 4. This thing is just literally sniper in Ultramarines, just sniping units that have 4 health without blinking. You're also getting a Waystone when it dies. It's like, this card is pretty nasty. So while I would probably prioritize Nadu in terms of like the legendary units, I would then go for Striking Scorpion. This thing is just a house, in my opinion. Warlock Skyrunner. I generally like this card. What's interesting is it also has like melee attack that's pretty high for a flyer. Usually it's kind of not that way for Eldar, so it's kind of an interesting like sort of flip in terms of how you usually address Eldar units. So it's kind of got that nice like reverse stat line. When you collect a Spirit Stone, deal 1 to 3 damage to a random enemy. When you get to play this and you've got some stuff that you're like ready to trade or like it's in your hand and you're setting it up, I mean, that's 1 to 3 damage per Spirit Stone. It's nothing to sneeze at. And I think the stats are pretty right for this card. So while maybe not essential, I do think that Skyrunner is a pretty solid card, and you're probably going to want to run it. Okay, now we get into some of the late game stuff, and we'll talk about this. Spirit Seer, Culinaris, 6 energy, 7 health, 6/6, just a very, very well statted card. Waystone, check. When you collect a Spirit Stone, gain 2 additional Spirit Stones. So while I think this legendary card is just all around pretty solid, it's definitely not as explosive as the others, and I hesitate to say that it gives you enough value as a legendary card. I think it's still very, very solid, and you're not going to be upset if you make this card, you get this card. I didn't get to play with it, obviously, because I had 0 in my collection. So take this with a grain of salt. I wasn't, terribly excited to play the card. I think it does have a good bit of upside. But I was always kind of a little underwhelmed, I guess. But the more I'm kind of looking at the stats of the card, like, this is just a good card. So I think this is a totally fine craft, although I would probably go for Nadu. Or, again, like, I'm going to encourage you to craft cards that are very similar power level, but the ones that are cheaper. That's again, my kind of logic here. All right, Host of the Dead. This is where the 5 Spirit Stones comes in. Spend all your Spirit Stones for each one, deploy a Wraith Guard. I don't think they let you get this trigger because they're like coming into play and they don't see the Spirit Stones for some reason. Or no, because you're expending all of them. So this thing could, 5 Spirit Stones make 5, 2, 3, 4 health Vanguard units. So obviously this is more of a control option. Host of the Dead is a super difficult card to deal with. So if you can set it up, this thing is scary. It's also a legendary. This would not be, again, I'm not going to recommend you out the gate bust in to make this deck, but this is one of the hardest to beat late game cards coming out of the Eldar. So definitely keep your eyes out for that one. Reclaim the Stars, 7 energy, draw 5 cards, use 5 stones, reduce their 5. I don't like this card. I guess there's a cool combo world, or like a world we live in where you spend 7 energy and then maybe you play a bunch of cheap cards for free. I just don't really know what Reclaim the Stars is supposed to be doing for you. You already have like just pretty solid card advantage in almost every single faction. Um, you don't really need a card that just strictly draws cards. And I don't think that, I don't think you're going to be having a banked 5 stones on 7 energy that you haven't wanted to use for your other boosting your other units. So just Reclaim the Stars is a little underwhelming for me, to say the least. Winged Autarch. I definitely played this card. It's pretty beefy. 7 health, 7 energy, 7/5. Waste on flying. Your other flying units gets +2 melee and +2 ranged attack. It's a pretty great curve topper for the vehicles that have flying. So I think Winged Autarch is, I would feel comfortable saying like auto include for kind of the top end for the vehicle decks. We're going to talk about another card just now that's also in there. So I think Autarch does quite a bit of work up front. They're going to have to work to kill it, probably because it's got flying. Obviously, you can still get the Waystone. And up front, you're getting, like, this is what I'm talking about. You can pay 8 energy to give this effect in Ultramarines, but this thing does that, and it's a unit. So I think you just, it's clearly a more powerful card. Hemlock Wraithfighter, this card was always good, and it's just well statted, right? So it's 8 energy, right? Obviously top of the curve, 8 health, pretty beefy, 8 range. This is like your Dreadnought, right? But this thing, although it doesn't do 1 to 2 damage to all enemy things, this thing, when you use 3 Spirit Stones, which 100% you can have banked by turn, 8 energy turn. Blast 5. This thing is dealing 8 to 1 target and 5 to 2 other targets, which, although this says flank, this Blast 5 could be blasting their Warlord for 5. I think Hemlock Wraithfighter is scary card, and very good. So I think that if you, let's say you've got some good early stuff going on, maybe you've crafted some of the early game cards, Hemlock Wraithfighter is an excellent late game card. Okay, Avatar of Khaine. I'm just going to say really quickly, I don't think this is where we're at, for in terms of win conditions. 9 energy, anything over 7, you really have to be critical of, in my opinion. It really needs to be getting you something up front. Okay, what do we get? 7 health, 2 armor. Okay, it's going to be hard to kill this thing. Makes sense for the Avatar of Khaine. 12 attack, obviously just going to be huge. 2 energy. 2 Spirit Stones, it's going to get Blast 4. And then, if it lives, which I imagine it might live, but here's the thing. So it's Necrons, Ultramarines, sort of Orks. I guess Eldar don't really have... There's quite a bit of unconditional removal floating around. I was kind of just tracking in my head which factions have access to it. This is not... You're getting a massive body, which, like, okay, if they don't kill it, you're probably going to win the game. But if they kill it, it does nothing. So it's one of those things where I'm not going to recommend this card. It's a 9-drop legendary card. You can make legendary cards far cheaper that are going to have better impact in your average game. If you want to make the Avatar, you want to feel cool, go for it. I don't think you need this card. I think at the top of the curve, you've got Autarch, Hemlock Wraithfighter, or Host of the Dead. That's plenty. So, jeez, man. I just forgot. Maybe if Eldar isn't the strongest deck, it's just got some really, really well-statted cards. So we'll see. We'll see if they're a menace on the ladder. Okay, moving right along. Thank you for sticking with me, y'all. And obviously, I'm going to have the time codes and everything. Okay, I think the starter... Necron Lord that just makes the little dorky guys for 2 energy is totally fine, but I do think that Imatech and Oricon specifically, I was really high on Oricon, are just much better. So I think if you're a Necron, person, you want to see these metal boys, Terminator boys go off. I do think Oricon, because of his, I always felt, again, check out my tier list. I just think that this is a very good effect, and I think that Necrons make use of stratagems extremely well. Imatech, 40 health. You can't discount having +5 health. Definitely makes a difference. And Lord of the Storm, pretty good into aggro matchups. Doesn't really matter for other matchups, but it's totally a fine card to spam in the early game while you're setting stuff up, and you've got that health, and you've got extra health to work with because this is healing you. Remember, you do have to take damage first to heal, so don't forget that. But I would, if I were to recommend which one to craft, I would say Oricon, pretty clearly. All right, Hyperlogic Strategist. Choose a Sawtech stratagem, put it into your hand. I didn't really play with this card much. Stratagems are very important to Necron strategy. Strategy. 2 energy. I mean, I think this is a fine rate for the card. Again, I'm not going to say run off and craft this card immediately, but I think it's totally fine to kind of use this early game, and it'll be decent. Tesla Immortal, just a good rate. So 2 energy, 3 health is okay. It's got Remnant, right? So there's a chance that this thing sticks around even longer. And it's Blast 2. 3 damage, Blast 2. Totally good rate. I just like this unit. So I think you can't really go wrong making that. Ophidian Destroyer. As you can see, I did not have this card, but I definitely played against it. Remnant, Frenzied, Artifice gains Stealth. Because this gets Stealth, it makes it quite a bit better when you Artifice. So let's say on turn 4, you play this card, and then you use your Ephemeral ability. If you're playing Oricon, this is going to gain Stealth. Frenzied is a pretty huge drawback in my mind. This unit attacks by itself at the start of your turn randomly. I just never bought into the whole frenzy thing. I didn't ever think that the Necrons that had it were well enough statted that it was good. I mean, three energy for 4 health and it's beating for 4 is pretty decent, but we just talked about cards in Eldar that just do this better, and you get to opt into what they're attacking and you get better value. So, even just juxtaposing this to other factions, I don't think this is where it's at. So I would not recommend Ophidian Destroyer. Now, I will very much sing the praises of Technomancer. I think this card works for almost every Necron deck. It's got Remnant itself, and its Artifice is reanimate a random friendly Remnant. It's just a lot of value. So what you can do is you punch in with your Ophidian Destroyer, I guess for this example. It's got Remnant. You use a stratagem, reanimate it. Right, comes instantly back. It's obviously it's not punching for much, but it's got health is probably the most important stat on a card like this. It's probably one of the best 3 drops for Necrons. You can't go wrong making Technomancer unless you're really not running that many units. But I don't really know if there's a totally control builds of Necrons where you wouldn't want something like this. I could be wrong. That would be the only caveat for this card not being good. Canoptek's Spider, I think, was always pretty decent. So it's got 5 health, 4 energy, 3/3, decent stats. Regenerate 1. Regenerate is nothing to sneeze at. It happens at the end of every turn, your turn and your opponent's, right? Artifice, deploy a Scarab, right? So it's very quickly, you can just poop out a bunch of Scarabs if you're into that sort of thing, which I think is a competitive deck. Canoptek Spider, you should be making. Resurrection Orb, reanimate all friendly remnants. I don't think this is where it's at, folks. I could see a world in which you're super aggressive, and so you could have some of these remnants that are ready to die with Frenzy or Flank or something, and then you Resurrection Orb for a lot of value. But let me just pan over to our friend Technomancer here and say that this, I think, is just a better card than Resurrection Orb because it's a body. And obviously you can just keep replicating this if you stick this behind a Vanguard card, right? So you can set up your board states where Technomancer is going to do the same thing, but just I think better over time. So I'm not huge on Resurrection Orb. Chronomancer, was this always a 5-drop? I guess maybe it was. 6 health, 5 energy, decent rate, 4/4, okay. Regenerate 1. When you deploy a troop, give it flank. Giving things flank, as anyone who's played against Ultramarines or Eldar knows, flank is just a very good stat. The option to instantly tussle with an enemy unit is just up tempo for you. So I think Chronomancer is pretty scary. Giving flank to all your units is again, nothing to sneeze at. I think that he's a pretty great kind of mid-range, aggro mid-rangey card that you can craft. Maybe not as essential in control strategies, but definitely a pretty scary card. Placable Conqueror, lower the cost of all troops in your deck by 2. I believe many people have played this card in these sort of more control, kind of go late versions of the deck. I think Implacable Conqueror, similar to Green Horde, is a viable strategy. So if that's what you want to go for, more of that sort of control kind of deck, I think Implacable Conqueror is going to be a pretty essential card. Lichguard, oh boy, just a house of a card in terms of stats. 5 energy, 6 health, 2 armor. This thing is beefy. Vanguard, of course, it's even got Remnant, so when you kill it, you got to kill it twice, effectively. 5 attack, obviously, they're always going to use ranged attack against it, but it's already taking 2 less damage on every ranged attack, and it's got 6 health. Lichguard is excellent. So far we've talked about some good epics. I think Necromancer and Lichguard, kind of in the dark in any Necron strategy, are really good. So can't really go wrong with that. Annihilation Command, didn't really play with this card. Give +2 melee, +2 range attack to your units. So this costs 6, right? Although it's not permanent. This is kind of strictly better, in my opinion, than what the Ultramarines got going on. I don't think this is where it's at. I don't think you want to be spending 6 energy. What I think everyone will realize pretty quickly about this game is that it's super tempo oriented, and you can't just sit around and like be like, oh, I got to buff 1 or 2 of my units, and then I didn't play a unit, so now my opponent's up a unit. I don't think you can really afford to do that in this game. So I would not recommend Annihilation Command. Mortal Pride, give 4 armor to your units until your next turn. Your units are going to be beefy as heck. I could see a world in which Immortal Pride is decent, but again, I don't know if you're getting enough out of this. Like, I think your opponent could just opt into not attacking you and just keep setting up their board. I'm just not sure. So I guess if anything, you would want this on an aggressive deck. So maybe this is a decent curve topper for an aggressive deck, the more I think about it, right? You give your stuff armor, you smack in. I'm not a huge fan. I'm not a huge fan of the card. Plasmancer, 7 health, 6 energy, decent stats, 4/4. Artifice, deal 3 damage to a random enemy. This thing has to be answered. It's going to be a problem if it's not. It's just a pretty great rate for a 6-drop, in my opinion. I don't think you can go wrong playing Plasmancer. Of course, you want to be thinking about, okay, I want to almost always try and trigger Artifice like right up front, right? So this really means you might be playing this on turn 7. So just kind of keep that in mind. But obviously, you can play it on turn 6. So I think Plasmancer is definitely pretty solid. Necron Lords, Remnant, Regeneration 2, Indomitable Whale, so it's choosing Overlord power. If this thing lives, it's pretty excellent. But again, it's like, it doesn't have Vanguard. Yes, it's pretty beefy, and it's got Regenerate 2, but like, your opponent could just look past this, kill your Warlord. But if you've got good setup, and there are a couple Vanguard cards in Necron, in the Necron, Sawtech Dynasty, it's an okay curve topper. I would not rush you to get this card. Triarch Stalker, Regeneration 1, your other units have +2 ranged attack, 7/7, pretty beefy. I think Triarch Stalker is like a pretty decent curve topper. I never got to play with it, but adding +2 range to all your units, it's got 7 health and Regenerate 1, and it's got really good attack stats. It's definitely a problem for your opponent. So I think Triarch Stalker is pretty decent, like maybe aggro mid-range curve topper. Tomb World. Talked about it earlier. Deploy up to 6 friendly infantry troops that die this game. Cost 8. This is very typically a great card in the sort of later game Necron decks. And I feel like Necrons, out of all the factions, have just kind of more of a consistent bent towards control. And I think a lot of players really feel like Necron control is kind of the end-all be-all for control decks. It's hard to disagree with them. I think they have so many good tools to do that. And Tomb World is a part of that. So for 8 energy, I think you are getting quite enough, right? We think about the Ork card that costs 10. This just comes down 2 turns sooner. And maybe you're not getting 10 units, you're getting 6. But I would take the discounted rate on this one. Tomb World is a legendary card that I would recommend crafting. Oops, skipped over. Vanguard Oberon. This thing is the example of what I want Ultramarines to have. 9 energy, very costly. 9 health, 2 armor. Nigh impossible to kill unless you've got a removal spell. Any attack against your warlord targets this troop instead. That is a powerful effect, right? It doesn't mean they can ignore it. It means they literally have to kill this card to get to a warlord. I do think that Vanguard Oberon is a really obnoxious card to deal with unless you've got, unconditional removal at that time in the game. Obviously, this thing is just going to go to Pound Town the turn after for 10. Again, I'm going to caution you on crafting cards that cost a lot as opposed to the ones that cost a little in terms of their energy cost. But Vanguard Oberon or Vargard Oberon. This essentially has Vanguard. It definitely affects the board in a way that a 9-drop probably has to in this game. So definitely worth looking into. Monolith, I always wanted to play it. I always thought it was good. Its talent is pretty crazy when you get it the next turn. Deal 8 damage to an enemy and 3 to... So this is kind of like the ultimate like late game curve topper. 10 energy is a lot. Maybe there are control versions that could run this. I imagine that's true. The Monolith is pretty dang sick. Sort of the roaming base with guns and spawning Necrons. Very cool card. I don't think I would tell you in good conscience to rush out and make this. Again, be skeptical of any card over 7 energy and what it does for your deck. And I think Monolith is just not the end-all be-all when it comes. Obviously, it's basically impossible to kill, but it doesn't have Vanguard, right? And so, again, it's just like your opponent can ignore this card being on the field for the turn it comes in. Obviously, later, it's just going to start destroying everything, as it should. So the more I think about it, in terms of legendaries for this faction, I think Chronomancer is a pretty good craft, and probably just Imatech. The other ones I'm not super wowed by unless it's Tomb World. So sorry, I shouldn't skip over Tomb World. And then I think you've got some excellent epics in specifically Technomancer, Lich-Guard. Obviously, you want to make Oricon. I think Tesla Immortal's pretty solid pick. Those would be like my go-to cards. Whew. All right. Got my water right here after the video. I'm very excited to drink. Okay. Let's talk about Chaos Marines or the Black Legion. I don't think it's a secret that this faction is kind of the standout one that has been struggling. And it's mostly because the way that it tends to operate is that you go tall, right? Instead of going wide, having a bunch of different units, you've got like 1 or 2 units that just have like 1 million. They used to be, I got to get Marks of Chaos out of my head, that have 1 million dark packs. You can sort of go wide, but that's not really what they do. And so if you're playing against any deck that has decent unconditional removal or just kind of spot removal, it's gonna do well against Chaos. Now, I think the Chaos leader, Harkin, is a fun aggro warlord, and I played him quite a lot, Harkin. But he just doesn't do enough into pretty much every other mid-range aggro or control deck, in my opinion. So I always kind of like the mid-range variant, like when they have it, sort of like the Ultramarines. I kind of prefer Varro to Marneus. I think Abaddon is potentially better than Sylar. Sylar, I think, is it random? Yeah, okay. That's what I remember, and he actually shows you deals damage, plus a melee to all friendly units, and make a Dark Pact. So if Sylar were not random, I think he would be the best. He would be the better warlord. But it is random. And all that Abaddon gets, I think, what is it? It's a random Dark Pact. That's fine. A random Dark Pact is a lot different than a straight up random card. So I think Abaddon, who also is pretty freaking cool, he's where it's at. that's probably where you want to point your first legendary craft if you're all about the Chaos Marines. Chaos Legionary, I always wanted this card, and they changed the art, which I like. After receiving a Dark Pact, deal 2 damage to a random enemy, 3 health, 2/2. It's just a very cheap card you can play early that has some solid upside. And if it doesn't die, and you actually get to go tall, you give it regeneration Dark Pact, you give it health Dark Pact. This thing is doing some damage. And I think it's probably, I would definitely recommend crafting this for the Chaos Marines. I never got it, so I didn't even get to play with it. But I did play against it, and it is scary. Dark Oratory, 3 energy, give a Dark Pact to all friendly troops. I think this was changed. I feel like this did something different when I was playing. I could be wrong. This, unlike some of the other stratagems we've been looking at that do buffs, I think this is a good rate. 3 energy, which, I think a lot of the time is going to maybe do like 2-3 Dark Packs. Like you'll probably be managing like 2 to 3 units with Chaos. I think that's pretty good. I don't know that I would run 2 of this card. I'd probably run like 1. So again, I would probably recommend Chaos Legionary made over this. But I think Dark Oratory it's what Chaos wants. Right, Gifts of Chaos. This was the other one. Give 2 random Dark Packs to a friendly troop. So obviously it's going to put 2 Dark Packs on 1 troop for 3 energy. I still think this is good enough, probably. Again, you want to be careful of your distribution of units to stratagems, right? You don't want to just have like 5 stratagems in your hand and like no units. But I think Gifts of Chaos, probably another card you're likely going to run, I would say at least 1. Spawndom. Deploy 1 Chaos unit. Chaos Spawn for each enemy. Yes, I played against this. So it's obviously a good anti-aggro card because these Chaos Spawns are terrible outside of that. I think it'd be fine as a 1-of, probably. But that's it. I'm not super excited about this card, but because it's a little too conditional. Whereas you'd rather just have like Dark Packs. Spawndom is really only doing anything if you're trying to take out like smaller units. I mean, it could be good, I guess, into certain go wide strategies, but I'm not huge on this card. I am pretty big on Aspiring Champion. 4 energy, 5 health. After receiving a Dark Pack, gain +1 range attack and +1 health. Anything that is going to live longer so it can get more Dark Packs is what you want in Chaos. So Aspiring Champion, very good 4-drop. Can't go wrong making it. Demonic Pact. Your Warlord and your troops with a Dark Pact gain invulnerable this turn. Okay, that's like okay, I guess. Your Warlord getting it is fine. And then you get to maybe trade, make, a couple of units that can punch in. I could say this is a 1-of. I never played really with or against this card, but just looking at it, I'm like, 4 energy is not a terrible rate for this sort of effect. Although, if you play Eldar, you get this on Nadu, which is a unit. So my inkling is to say that this is a little weaker than it probably looks. But I don't think it's out of the question that you can run a stratagem like that. But again, I really think units is kind of where it's at in your stratagems, and your units need to do quite a bit, and your stratagems need to do quite a bit for your units or against theirs. Okay, Extra of Executions, definitely more of an aggro bent, right? When you deal damage, 3 damage to an enemy warlord. This is on 4, as opposed to the Ultramarines having this on 6. Pretty good stats. If you're trying to go for more of an aggro build, I think it's fine. But it's not you just really want to consider, I want to play the cards that can scale the best with Dark Packs and stick around to get more Dark Packs. This is okay. It's like a good rate overall. But I think, if I'm choosing 4-drops, I'm definitely playing Aspiring Champion, probably over this card. And then I'm probably playing Possessed Champion as well. This is also a good place to spend a legendary card. Let's look at the rate. 4 energy, 5 health, 5 attack, 0. Flank. It's coming in, and it's going to punch a unit. And strike, gain a Dark Pact. So it's one of those things where, like, you get to choose when you play it. You kill something. It's probably going to live, right? Because I think that's going to be the ideal play pattern. And then maybe it gets +2 health and camouflage. Maybe it gets +1 regeneration. and then it sticks around. Possessed Champion is a very good unit. And, obviously it's a little awkward into flyers, right? Because it would need ranged attack to actually attack them. But other than that, this thing is just punching for a lot and sticking around. Can't really go wrong with it. Ukris, I always wanted to play with because I think that it is a pretty solid card. Never got it, unfortunately. 6 health, 5 energy, strike, gain 2 Dark Pacts of Blood, which is the +2 melee and Vanguard, which is like the ones from Khorne, which makes sense with the whole vibe here. So again, it's not doing anything when it comes to play, right? But if you could set it up with maybe some Dark Pacts, make it a little beefier, for like turn 6, 7 or something like that, this could run away with the game because it's going to get Vanguard and it's going to get huge in terms of attack. So this actually does protect you if it gets to do what it wants to do. But, again, it's susceptible to removal. It could die, and there's not too much you can do. You've always got a Warlord that's probably going to be able to do 2 damage, so I think you can scrounge up another 4 damage to get rid of this, unless you set it up behind maybe a Vanguard unit. So sequencing is going to be really key. Master of Possession, I definitely played quite a bit with this card. 6 health, 5, 5/3 stats. Okay, what is Rites of Possession? Ephemeral. 3 energy, deal 2 to 4 damage if a target dies, deploy a possessed Marine. So you get to kill a target and you just get a free flank unit. This to me is a decent body with decent card advantage. So I think Master of Possession, although is not kind of like the most impressive sort of epic that we've talked about, I think he's pretty beefy and he's got some really good upside if he lives. So I do think Master of Possession is a pretty good craft. Okay, Dark Apostle, 6 energy, 7 health, Artifice, give a random Dark Pact to each friendly troop. Big problem for your opponent if this thing doesn't die. So Artifice, obviously you're making Marks of Chaos or Dark Pacts. That's going to take some time to get used to. I think this card is also pretty excellent. Again, like up front, it might not get you something unless you're saving later so you can Artifice the same turn. That's probably how I would play this card, right? Maybe you get 1 or 2, maybe a little bit more units out, and then like maybe on turn 8, when you have access to 8 energy, you play this plus a Dark Pact, give everything a Dark Pact. And that's a pretty huge swing. So I think Dark Apostle is an excellent legendary to craft as well. Venom Crawler was really interesting. As you can see, this thing is just a 6/6/6. Number of the Beast. Your stratagems cost 1 less. Pretty good. I think this is a card I didn't get to play too much with. But I think that it does enough. It's just a solid statted creature or unit. And you're discounting things that really matter because all of your stratagems are going to revolve around giving Dark Pacts. And if those become cheaper, that's good for you. So I think it's a solid card. Draknian, very cool card. Give +4 melee attack to a friendly unit. Yes, unit. So it's all coming back. So the other one gave +2 shuriken, probably to your war leader, your warlord rather. Getting tired now. Well, we're almost there. Give +4 to your warlord here. 7 energy to do that, even on Abaddon, who's like a big beefy boy with 40 health. Sure, you could play it. I don't really like this card personally, so I wouldn't craft it, especially right off the bat. But it is pretty sick, and maybe you've got more of a control bent, and that might work for you. But definitely not super impressed by that. Mauler Fiend, 9 health, 8 energy, strike, deal 1 damage to all enemies for each Dark Pact on this troop. I just don't like this card. I never really did. So it doesn't do anything up front. It doesn't have Vanguard. It doesn't have any effect when it comes into play. So then you got to wait, and then you have to like load it up with Dark Pacts for its strike to do anything. Think it's a little bit too much of an investment for an 8 energy card. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I don't think that this card's very good. Xander, Kaon, 9 energy. We're really getting up there. 10 health, huge stats. Create a random Black Legion stratagem in your hand. Yeah, I don't think they let you see what that is, right? No. So hopefully sometime they'll add that. Yeah, not impressed, right? This is kind of the same thing as the top end for Ultramarines. It's just like a big, beefy card that doesn't add anything really in terms of like staying power to like to protect your warlord or something like that. Obviously, if it lives, yeah, it's probably going to win the game, right? But for 9 energy, do you really need that? I don't think so. I don't think Iskander is kind of where it's at. Black Crusade, deal 4 damage. Oh, deploy 4 random troops from your deck. So this is, we've got a lot of that sort of top end control stuff going on. 4 random troops for 10 energy? I don't think so. So please don't make this card. Unless you really want to have fun, if this is your version of fun, then please have fun. But I would not recommend it. So that's where we're at. So honestly, I forgot. I was a little surprised. There are actually some really great 6, 4, and 5 legendary units aside from Abaddon, and then I think between Aspiring Champion and Master of Possession, you've got a couple good epics as well as the Spider. So yeah, almost there. Jeez, wow. Okay, Tyranids. You're starting out with the guy that makes a bunch of termagants. What is his name? Tervagon. Makes sense because he makes termagants. Interestingly enough, there are 240 health leaders for this faction, and generally that's been pretty good. Tervagon I never really liked. I think that's because I felt the deck was inconsistent. You're doing a very like swarm, make everything cost like 1 or 2, right? So overwhelming swarm, your infantry troops cost 1 less. This turn costs 2 energy. There are ways to go really crazy with Tervagon. I just never really liked it because I thought it was inconsistent. That's just my 2 cents. Maybe the deck is better than I thought it was, but it just never quite impressed me. Neurothrope, on the other hand, always impressed me. Spirit Leech, deal 1 damage to an enemy and give 1 health to a friendly unit. You could spam this. It costs 1. If it costs 2 for Emotech to do a very similar effect, this costing 1 is a huge game. And when we talk about Synapse, which is a key mechanic in a lot of the Tyranids, this thing just sets it up perfectly. And +1 health means you don't have to heal, you just stack the health. So you're pretty much just spamming that every turn. I think that's incredible. The other one I would say, so like if you really want to play what I would say are the ideal Tyranid strategies, in my mind, I would go either Neurothrope or Swarmlord. I think those are where it's at. Swarmlord is just pretty brutal. 3 attack, 1 health, 40 health for him. And then give +1 melee attack and +1 range attack and +1 health to a friendly troop for 2. And then also if they have Synapse, it's giving it to 2 other adjacent units. Excellent, excellent. So Overwhelming Swarm, I don't really need to say much. This is for Tervagon for the most part. You're only going to play it, I think, mostly in that deck. I could be wrong. Biovore, love this card. Well statted, I think well designed. 3 energy, 4 health. At the end of your turn, deploy a Spore Mine. So this has very low health, right? At the start of the turn, destroy this unit, deal 3 damage to a random enemy. It's just it's a well statted 3-drop. It's got 4 health, it's got 3 ranged. You're making a body up front, right? You're getting all this upfront value. And if they don't kill it, right? And I would say when you play against this card, you don't care about the Spore Mine. You just want to get Biovore off the field. That's my little tip there. If this lives to get a couple spores, you've gotten your value. It's great, right? It's maybe done 3 to 6 damage without its attack. So Biovore, really great card. Love that card. Gene Stealer. I think people were kind of down on this card. So it's 3 energy, 4 health. Obviously, it's only going to attack up front. Also, Gene Stealer is super cool. I remember my friend having these. Camouflage Swarm. At the start of your turn, create a Gene Stealer. Swarm is scary. If you're able to start stacking a Swarm unit, they don't have removal for it, it's going to win you the game. And the fact that Gene Stealer just gives you a Gene Stealer at the beginning of your turn if they don't kill it, I always felt like that was good. I think other players have said that it's just a little too weak. And stat-wise, it's pretty easy to get rid of. So it's maybe not like I would probably encourage Biovore over this, but I think Gene Stealer is a pretty solid card, and I would be happy to run it in most decks. Hardened Biology gave 2 armor to a friendly troop. This is good with Synapse. And we'll go to the Synapse cards. I think Hardened Biology it's a little costly, right? It's 3 energy to do that. I still found it to be pretty good. So I think I would probably run one or two of it. So maybe not essential, but decent. Infinite biomorphologies. Choose an effect, give it to all troops in your hand. This lends itself more to Turvagon, right? More that sort of swarm strategy. I never played with the card. 3 energy to do this is pretty good, I think. But is it the strategy I would necessarily recommend? Probably not. But I could be wrong. Maybe that deck is better than I gave it credit for. Okay, here is a legendary I definitely am pretty excited about. Tyranid Prime. I just think this thing is really, really strong. 4 energy, 5 health, Synapse, right? I've been talking about it. What does it do? When this unit is targeted by a friendly stratagem, adjacent units get the same effect. So you can trigger the +1 health with your Neurothrope every turn. You can give 2 armor to this with the previous card, right? Hardened Biology, it's going to give the things next to it. And what else does it do? When a friendly unit triggers Swarm, give it +1 melee attack and health. So this is great with Turvagon, right? But also, I found it to be good in pretty much any of the Tyranid decks that have any Swarm cards in it. This just has so much upside. It's also a 5/4 with 5 health. Great card. Just Tyranid Prime in your prime. Definitely a card I would recommend. Von Ryan's Leaper. Definitely one of the scariest stealth units that comes out of the Tyranids, as it should be. It's 4 health, 4 energy, 5/0, right? It's just going to punch, and it's got Swarm. When played on the left side of the troop, it combines and you get those stats, right? And it's got Tide. So you can run this out on turn 4 if you're like, you know what, I got to kill something. I got to kill that Vanguard, pesky Vanguard unit with 5 health. Let me play my Von Ryan's Leaper and try and nab it the next turn. You can also play it on 8 and make a huge Von Ryan's Leaper, or probably just 2 separate Von Ryan's Leapers. This also works with Turvagon, right, with all the swarm strategies. So Von Ryan's Leaper is just probably all around just a good card. You get card advantage. It's got stealth, which is obviously probably the best part about it. And then it's got the upside that you can swarm and decide how you want to do that with Tide as well. Apex Predator. I think I played one of these in my Synapse decks because it gives a vulnerability to a unit, so obviously that spreads to other units. Maybe a one of. No more than that. I don't think it's good enough. Zoanthrope. I always wanted you. Always played against you. Never had you. Synapse. 5 energy, 6 health, 3/5. When a friendly unit triggers Synapse, deal 1 to 3 damage to a random enemy. This thing just starts zapping people. And this is why I love Neurothrope. Because even though I would play this on turn 6, you get so much value for it. Because, and I'm sure that's why they designed Neurothrope's card the way it is, because inherently you would have to play a unit, then use the effect. So Zoanthrope just fits perfectly into the Synapse strategy with Neurothrope. And so does this next card, which I also really wanted and didn't have. Broodlord. High Fleet Leviathan. 6 energy, 6 health, pretty beefy melee attack. Stealth. And stealth is just such a good stat for these just like hugely punchy, swingy games. Synapse. When this unit triggers Synapse, it triggers twice. So, oh my god, you just play this thing, you use your Neurothrope ability, you're going to get 2 health to all units, right? And then this thing has stealth, so they like can't even deal with it. It's going to punch them. And then you get a second Synapse trigger after that. It's just such a powerful card. So Broodlord gets an A+ from me in terms of the legendary department. High Fleet Leviathan. Your troops cost 1 less for the rest of this battle. Maybe Turvagon really does want to go that late with this card, and then it actually makes a difference. I'd be so surprised that this is that good. Because it's 7 energy. Just by the time you're up there, I feel like you've already like kind of swarmed the board. So I don't really know what this is doing. Could be off base. I didn't play with or really against this card. I don't think I would recommend it. High Fleet Tyrant. Okay. This is 7/7/7. We had 6/6/6 before. Huge. 7 energy, 7 health, 7 attack, and range attack. Synapse. And Synapse is just so good. And then he's got an upside, right? Give +2 melee attack and +2 range to a friendly troop, because this is the guy that is the warlord, the Hive Tyrant. I think he's a good curve topper in the Neurothrope build, but also I just think he gets you some pretty sick value. So I would probably play this in Turvagon as well. And really, a lot of these cards can be played with the Hive Tyrant Warlord that's, a little bit more on the aggressive side. Just because there are some really great cheap cards that can trigger Synapse. And obviously this is like a pretty huge unit that's a huge problem for your opponent if it lives. So this is a 7-drop that I think is doing enough work. Winged Tyrant. Synapse flying, 99999. When a friendly unit triggers Synapse, draw a card. It's very strong. It's going to maybe draw you a card on turn 10. Yeah, just wouldn't be too concerned with making this card. Again, you really just want to think about cheaper, more powerful, or on power level cards. And Winged Tyrant just doesn't really pass that test for me. Wow. Okay, so Broodlord takeaways: Broodlord excellent, Zoanthrope, Von Ryan's Leaper, Tyranid Prime, Biovore in general, and then I would recommend both of these leaders. Okay, we did it. We did it, folks. That is all the epic and legendary recommendations that I can think with my little brain for today. We went through every single faction. Thank you for tuning in. Unfortunately, I'm going to be away for a little bit as the game gets released, actually. So I'll be a little bit behind the curve, but I will try and bring you guys more videos. We've been getting a lot of nice comments and likes and people tuning in. So I think we're going to be here to stay with Warpforge for quite a bit. And I'm super, super excited to get into the game. So I hope y'all are getting hyped or already enjoying the beta if you're a part of it. And I will catch you next time. Thanks.